The Circular Economy of Rags, Lilu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 1. The Kindergarten of the Cultural Revolution. The late 1960s in China. The Cultural Revolution is in full swing. Chairman Mao has unleashed a movement to purge bourgeois elements from society, resulting in the breakdown of families, schools, and government. Intellectuals are being persecuted, and children are often left to fend for themselves while their parents are sent to labor camps or re-education centers. Lilu is in Tangshan, an industrial coal mining city in Hebei province. He is living in a boarding school that reflects the chaos of the outside world, a place where resources are scarce, supervision is negligent, and the strong prey on the weak without consequence. This is not a normal childhood, it is a vacuum of care. Okay, let's get started with Chapter 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. From left to right, from right to left. It was always 8. I lay on the bed and looked up at the wooden beams of the roof, counting. The last 3-year-old besides myself was crying in the big room of the kindergarten, a boarding school for preschoolers, but soon even he would go, and I would be left all alone to count to 8, from left to right, from right to left. The teacher would stop cursing as soon as the last parents came, full of apologies, the child's crying ceasing with their hugs. And then the door would close, the lock click, and it would be quiet. We begin in total isolation. In a normal society, a child is the center of a family. Here, Lilu is a remnant, left behind because his parents, intellectuals, are likely under political pressure or absent. The counting of the beams is a coping mechanism. In a world where he has no control over his safety or his loneliness, he imposes order the only way he can, by counting the cage. Back to the book. I turned my eyes to the window to see the sunset, briefly beautiful, then dim. I knew the light would disappear. I knew the dark would come. I knew there would always be 8 wooden beams. Then the lizards came out. All over the floor and on the beams of the roof, I heard the sounds. I didn't hear them when all the children were there on weekdays, but when everyone was gone, the noises began. Ghosts walking, I thought, and the lizards, frightening with their horrible poison, began to scuttle about. I felt the darkness press upon me while the sound of the lizards grew louder. I held my breath, then, exhausted, fell asleep. On Sunday morning the darkness was gone, the lizards were gone, everything seemed normal again. And again I counted the wooden beams. Then the hunger. I even dreamt of eating lizard meat. The smell of cooked lizard became almost tangible, but the only thing I could do was drink water to fill my stomach so full it hurt, and made me briefly forget my hunger. Even stomachache was better than that. Pause. Did you catch that? Hunger isn't just background misery here. It actively rewires his mental map of the world. The lizard has been coded as poison, death, terror. But scarcity forces a reclassification. If it's edible, it's no longer a monster. The dream of cooked lizard meat is the mind quietly demoting fear in favor of survival. This is not courage, it's necessity doing the thinking for him. The key line is choosing stomach pain over hunger. That's a primitive cost-benefit calculation. Pain is temporary, starvation is existential. A 3-year-old is already learning to optimize under constraint. This is how the era imprints itself, not through slogans, but through forced trade-offs that teach you what actually matters. Psychologically, this is the birth of a pattern you'll see again and again later. When reality contradicts the official story, lizards are deadly, hunger says otherwise. He doesn't cling to belief. He adapts. Fear becomes negotiable. Rules become conditional. The world stops being moral and starts being empirical. Back to the book. Then I started to play. When everybody was there was little play. I was the very lowest in my kindergarten, the most outcast of all. I could never behave freely. I would be punished and cursed at by the first official of my class, and all the other officials would follow his lead, heaping abuse on me. Only on Sunday could I play freely. I jumped from one bed to another. I went round on all the 50 beds in the big room. And on the first official's bed, I jumped up and down as hard as I could, hoping it would collapse. But I was too little. I was only 3. Nothing changed. His quilt was special, covered with silk. Sometimes I just sat on the quilt and stroked it. So smooth. It was much better than mine, which was only right as everybody was better than me. But on Sunday, All the beds, all the quilts, belonged to me. Later, the door would open. The others had come back and would show off the goodies they had brought from home. They talked about the movies they had seen or the stories they had heard from their parents. Then we would see who had the most things. Whoever brought the most and talked the most was of course the best. My class had a first official, a second official, and a third official. They were not chosen by the teacher. The qualifications were bringing the most things back from home, having a better and more comfortable life, being the best fighter. The first official was the king. If you didn't obey him, he beat you up. That was the order of things in the kindergarten. Pause. What's happening here is not play in the normal sense. It's temporary sovereignty. When everyone is present, Lilu has no body autonomy, no speech autonomy, no emotional autonomy. His movements are policed by the officials. Play requires safety. Hierarchy kills it. Sunday removes witnesses and enforcers, so play suddenly becomes possible, not because conditions improved, but because power briefly vanished. Jumping from bed to bed is not random joy. It's a full audit of territory. 50 beds, all claimed, all ranked, all unequal during the week. Now temporarily neutral. This is what dispossessed people do the moment authority leaves. They traverse space that's usually forbidden. The hope that the king's bed will collapse is pure, undeveloped revolutionary instinct. If the symbol breaks, the system might fall with it. It doesn't, but the instinct is there. The silk quilt matters more than the beating. He doesn't steal it, damage it, or defile it. He touches it. That's not envy. It's sensory exposure to inequality. He learns class difference not as an abstract idea, but as texture, smooth versus rough, warm versus thin. This is how hierarchy actually embeds itself, not through ideology, but through the body noticing contrast. The line, which was only right as everybody was better than me, is devastating. That's internalized caste logic at age 3. No one has to explain inferiority once material differences repeat often enough. By Sunday night, the system reinstates itself through ritualized display. Goods, stories, movies, parents. Cultural capital plus material capital equals legitimacy. The children reenact adult society perfectly without instruction. Back to the book. They called me Dry Shrimp Eye because I was scrawny but had a big face with small eyes. I wore the same jacket and army green trousers all year round. My clothes were covered with holes and patches, my nose ran, and I was always dirty. Naturally, I was at the bottom of the class. At first, I tried to compete with them. Once, when the teacher gave me 2 rice cakes, I didn't eat them. I was hungry all night and all Sunday because I wanted to compete with the cakes on Sunday night. But after the display, the first official simply took the cakes. He offered some to other children and ate the rest. He always bullied me and others who were small. He was fat, but his face was fair, so we called him Whiteface. In Chinese opera, characters with white faces are bad. Whiteface somehow learned that my parents were people with problems, so he taunted me. Your father's a spy and your mother's a landlord's daughter, and you're nothing but a bastard. He started the children chanting, "Bastard, bastard, nobody picks you up. Bastard, bastard, nobody picks you up." On Sunday night, he demanded any cake I had left. But now I ate the cakes before they came back. I ate 1 cake on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, but I was always unbearably hungry. Pause. Here we see the political stigma filtering down to children. The taunt, "Your father's a spy and your mother's a landlord's daughter," is a specific political accusation. In the Cultural Revolution, having a bad background, landlord, intellectual rightist, made you a subhuman class enemy. Whiteface uses this political weapon to justify his theft. Lilu learns a hard lesson about property rights. If you are weak, you cannot save for the future. You must consume what you have immediately, or it will be expropriated. This is where deprivation hardens into strategy. The nickname, the patched clothes, the dirt, all become visible proof of inferiority, until the hierarchy feels natural. Saving the rice cakes is a child's belief in a future. Having them seized teaches him that delayed reward only works if you have power. Whiteface's political taunts import adult ideology into the playground, turning theft into justice and cruelty into righteousness. Eating the cakes early is not weakness, it's adaptation. When the weak cannot protect property, the rational move is to consume immediately. Now, back to the book. Kindergarten was like a prison. Every morning from Monday to Saturday we got up, dressed quickly, and washed. Then the whistle blew and we lined up to go to the dining room across a narrow yard in another building. There we sat at long tables with our hands behind our backs. The teacher made a speech. The big ones, who were 6 or 7, would recite some of Mao's quotations. If you didn't do it well, you got into trouble. In the middle class, we repeated the quotations after the teacher. The little ones didn't have to do anything. After breakfast, we went to the playground to do whatever we liked. Sometimes the teacher would give a signal and we had to run to a square wooden fort. The game was to see who could climb the bars to the top of the fort, only you had to be sure to let the first official get to the top first. If anyone else got there first, he would regret it when the teacher was gone, which was most of the time the teachers slept or did their errands. The one who got to the top first would be given a sweet. 3 afternoons a week we had to clean the school. This was considered a proletarian collective activity. After the cleaning, some would be praised, some criticized. Nobody really cared though if the place was clean. We did it mainly so that the teacher could find someone to criticize. The first official was put in charge. Teacher Yan came out now and then to check on us. Monkey, the second official and a sly weakling, flattered the first official, who would take his side. Monkey always bullied Blockhead and Blue Robe, but a few times Teacher Yan caught him idling and told him to pick up all the leaves in the schoolyard himself. We were glad because we did not have to do any more work ourselves, but Monkey took his revenge on those who sneered. The teacher asked Whiteface who did well and who didn't. Monkey would tell Whiteface to report Blue Robe when the teacher asked who was responsible for not picking up a leaf. Sometimes Monkey deliberately threw a leaf on the ground and accused Blue Robe of negligence. Then Blue Robe would say it was not him. Teacher Yan hated people to cross her, so she hit Blue Robe. Whiteface had some power, but Teacher Yan was the real authority, so I knew it was important to be the authority. Teacher Yan controlled the children by making them hate each other, by encouraging factions. That was what you could do when you had authority. The teachers beat the children with whatever was at hand, a fly swat or a stick. Teacher Yan used a bamboo switch. At meals, we had to sit still while the teacher put the food in our bowls. If you ate too fast, you would be hit. If you went on eating fast, you would have to stand and watch the others eat. But you couldn't dawdle either. And you had to eat everything. Once Teacher Yan put a piece of fatty skin with a lot of hair on it in my bowl. I had always hated fat. It made me want to vomit. The way I dealt with fat was first to put it in my mouth. When I saw Yan turn away from me, I would swallow it whole. I always felt sick afterwards. Once I swallowed the fat too fast and it made me cough. I coughed out the fat and it splattered on the table. Yan pulled my ear and made me stand up. She said to everyone, "Look, he is still a boy, but already he has such serious bourgeois behavior. The peasants work to raise us. Chairman Mao and the party give us good food and clothes. But you don't value all this. You don't even want to eat meat. How you waste things. You were trying to play tricks, but you can never deceive me. I will find out sooner or later. You are sure to become a class enemy." I was scared to death. The other children stopped eating and stared until the teacher waved her bamboo switch and told them to hurry up and eat. I was left standing. "You don't want to eat meat," she said to me. "Now you'd better not eat anything." She didn't let me finish my food, but she insisted I eat the piece of fat. From then on, I had a great fear of fat, of the meals, of the dining room, of the teacher and her switch. Later I found ways to revenge myself on Yan. When she was not there, I broke her switch in two so she could only hit us with her hand. That wasn't so bad. But the fat was awful. Whenever there was fat in my bowl, I hid it in my pocket. My pocket was always very dirty. Pause. Teacher Yan is a classic example of an authoritarian using ideology to mask cruelty. By calling the child's refusal to eat fat bourgeois behavior, she turns a physical reaction into a political crime. This was common in the era. Every action, no matter how small, could be analyzed for revolutionary purity. Li Lu's resistance is small but significant. He hides the fat in his pocket. It is his first act of subversion. This section shows how total control is taught as routine. The whistle, the lines, the recited quotations, obedience is trained before understanding. Play is allowed only if it reinforces hierarchy. You may climb, but only after the king. Collective labor isn't about cleaning. It's about producing guilt and targets for punishment. Authority works by outsourcing cruelty downward, turning children into informants and rivals. Teacher Yan's real power isn't the bamboo switch, it's ideology. By labeling a child's gag reflex as bourgeois behavior, she converts biology into political guilt. Fear of the dining room becomes fear of thought itself. Li Lu's response, breaking the switch and hiding the fat, is not rebellion but calibration, resistance that stays just below detection. This is where he learns the core survival rule of the system. Never confront power directly, adapt quietly, and endure. This passage contrasts two kinds of authority and shows how one collapses the other. Back to the book. One day, a new teacher came. Teacher Li was sent down to our school in punishment for some mistake she made at the Education Bureau. Our school was the sort of place where people would be sent for punishment. Li was very nice to us. She had studied education and child psychology. She wanted us to learn things, so she started a course in handicraft, where we made aeroplanes, rabbits, and other things with paper. She didn't teach us long, but she left a deep impression on me. She liked to sing. Before she came, we seldom sang. There was an old accordion in the kindergarten, which she used to teach us to sing, and we came up with all kinds of tunes. Poor Blockhead simply could not sing, yet he was very happy to join in with the others and sang the loudest. Teacher Yan would have hit Blockhead, but Teacher Li didn't even have a stick. She just looked over her glasses and smiled. She was very gentle with us. We laughed while we sang. At night, after the light was turned off, we weren't supposed to talk. Teacher Yan came to check on us, and we all pretended to be asleep. As soon as she left the room, a commotion would start. The most frightening one involved the lizards. They looked like fearsome little crocodiles and skittered rapidly across the floor. They were very poisonous. If they touched you, you would die, or at least your hand would fall off, we thought. When the teacher was gone, someone would shout, "Here comes the lizard!" Then everyone would scream and run around frantically to escape it. It was always Whiteface who led this, perhaps yelling, "The lizard has crawled into Blockhead's quilt." Others echoed the shout. Blockhead, frightened, would cry. When the teacher came and asked him who had shouted, he did not dare tell the truth. People who wanted to curry favor with Whiteface would say, "It was Li Lu who shouted." The teacher punished me by standing me by the door where it was cold. I said I didn't do it, but nobody would listen. If someone said it was you, then it was you. That was it. This was unjust. It was not such an awful punishment to stay alone in the big room at weekends, because that was my fate. But this was not my fault. I became angrier and angrier as I remembered all the things Whiteface had done to me, taking my cakes, cursing at me, ordering me about. He always made things my fault. As hatred filled my heart, a lizard once crawled across my feet. I could not move. The teacher would beat me. The children all shouted, "The lizard is crawling over Li Lu." I wanted to run and hide under my quilt, but I dared not. The teacher was coming. Transfixed, I watched the lizard crawl slowly over one foot, then the other. My feet seemed to swell with red and purple patches. I was cold and scared, but I was terrified about my feet. I could feel them swelling to an enormous size. They were totally numb, which was how the poison worked. When the teacher left, the room was deathly silent. Perhaps I frightened them, standing there like a dead crane with staring eyes, saying nothing. After a while, the teacher came back and told me to go back to bed. I was so numb she had to carry me. All night I dreamt about what I would look like the next day. The monsters and demons I saw in picture books all came back to haunt me. The lizard grew into a dragon, its huge claws and long tail dwarfing me, its jaws chewing my feet away. When I looked tremulously down at my feet in the morning, they did not look different. I examined them minutely. Nothing. They were the same. But why hadn't the lizard poisoned me? Maybe the lizards were secretly on my side. After all, I was the only one who kept them company at weekends, and I never joined in when others threw stones at them and then ran away. To test this idea that the lizard was my friend, I went to find lizards under the bricks. At first, I was a little afraid, but gradually I found the lizard did nothing to me. Once I put my hand out and let it crawl over it, I looked at my hand apprehensively for a day, but nothing happened to it. My courage grew. I was no longer afraid of lizards. Pause. This is the turning point. The collective belief of the group is that the lizard is fatal. Li Lu discovers, through accident and then experimentation, that the collective belief is a lie. This gives him asymmetric information. He knows something the powerful leader, Whiteface, does not. He realizes that fear is the primary tool of control, and if he is not afraid, the control breaks. This passage marks the collapse of fear as a governing force. Teacher Lee briefly proves that authority doesn't require cruelty, making the system's violence look gratuitous. The lizard episode then completes the lesson. Forced to endure what everyone knows is fatal, Li Lu survives and tests the belief for himself. Fear is exposed as a shared fiction, not a fact. Once he understands that terror, not truth, holds the hierarchy together, Whiteface's power is already broken. Back to the book. As the outcast, I suddenly felt that now I had friends who supported me. My whole outlook began to change. Before, I always tried to find ways to avoid offending the first official. He had power, he was strong and could fight, and had many supporters. When they joined together to bully me, I had felt bad and isolated. But now I had the lizards on my side. They were afraid of lizards. When they played the game of shouting that a lizard had crawled into someone's quilt, I felt relieved not to be afraid. When they played the lizard game on the weaker children, such as Blockhead, I felt sorry for him. The next day, I found he was all right. So the lizard had been listening to me when I willed it not to hurt Blockhead. Gradually, I grew in confidence. I was no longer afraid of lizards, or of the first official and his gang. I started to think that I should do something to fight them. I knew I couldn't win if I fought them alone since they outnumbered me. They weren't as powerful as they looked, though, for they constantly fought among themselves, each struggling to get above the others. But very few would challenge the first official. Once someone acquired that position, it was very hard to oust him, so he became very confident and despotic. Gradually, I realized that the most important thing was confidence. If you had confidence and believed you were right, you would feel stronger than others. I made up my mind that my friend the lizard would help me to punish the first official. I started to collect lizards. One day, I wrapped quite a few in my jacket and put them in Whiteface's quilt. I hid them under his pillow and waited for night to come. After supper, everyone stood in line to go to the bedroom. I walked slowly to Whiteface's bed. "The lizards have crawled into Whiteface's quilt," I shouted. Everyone was shocked. Up to now, only the first official or his lieutenants had started the lizard game. Nobody had even thought it possible that a lizard could ever crawl into the quilt of the first official. Then, Whiteface felt something crawling on him. He turned back the quilt and saw 7 or 8 lizards crawling in all directions. He screamed. Everyone tried to run out of the room. The first official started to cry. No one could believe that the first official could cry. The teacher came in and told us to go to bed. Then she asked who shouted first. Nobody said anything. The first official was dazed. He had not completely realized what had happened. No one dared to say anything. Who shouted first did not seem important now. What shocked them was that this time it was true, whereas before it was just a game. Lying in bed, I felt the lizards really were my friends. They had brought me revenge. Whiteface fell ill. His face grew even whiter. Others dared not say a word. At night, everyone looked carefully into their quilts. Since everyone was afraid, no one shouted. Only I could sleep well. Pause. Li Lu executes a psychological coup. He doesn't defeat the bully with strength, he defeats him by exposing his fear. The moment the king cries, his authority evaporates. This is a profound lesson in power dynamics. Authority often rests on the projection of invulnerability. Once that illusion is punctured, the power is gone. Back to the book. Several days later, they remembered that it was I who had shouted that day. I knew they would try to take revenge, so I was prepared. When a group came up to me in the playground, I went to the wall, pretending not to see them. I played with the lizards, letting them crawl over my feet, hands, and arms. When the other children saw this, they were amazed. Nothing could be more fearsome than these lizards, but the monsters were good to me. The second and third officials looked at me in awe. The first official, though, could not show fear. He swaggered over to me, clenching his fists, but I was prepared and hit him first, knocking him to the ground, which completely crushed his position as the number 1 leader. The second and third officials looked at each other, then left. That night, I went back to the dormitory as if nothing had happened, but the news had spread. Everyone looked at me entirely differently. I became a sort of god, an incarnation of the lizard, and was given the name Lizard. In our small society, I rose from the very bottom right to the top, yet I retained a deep sense of inferiority from my lack of contact with the outside world. When other children were talking about what they saw and heard on Saturday night and Sunday, I felt inferior. I had no way of acquiring information. I had no home, no one to take me out, no good food, no picture books, and nothing to offer round after the weekend. After I became the first official, I wanted to change the system. Whiteface had the most food, and picture books he saw most movies, his family was the richest. As first official, he had had all the privileges. He cursed, kicked, and hit others whenever he liked. If he saw someone eating something better than he had, he would demand it. In the northeast corner of the small playground in front of the school, there was an elephant whose trunk was a slide and whose legs were immense stone pillars, twice as high as your head. Every Sunday evening, we gathered under the belly of the elephant. The children came here to present offerings, such as sweets, to the first official. Then we began to tell stories, what we had done or heard, what movies they had seen, what picture books they had brought back. We would hand around the picture books while someone was telling a story his parents had told him as best he could remember it. Those who had seen the movie or read the book could follow each other's narrative. I had to ask detailed questions to understand a story, and often interrupted the storyteller, who would try to make the story clearer. Most found it hard to answer my questions because they had not been paying close attention, but said that they would see the movie or read the book again more carefully. I could imagine the stories they were telling. I developed a keen sense of imitation, narration, and imagination. I had a great thirst for knowledge. These Sunday evenings thus evolved from boasting sessions into storytelling meetings and discussions. I would sum up what was useful to us, stories we could act out later on. After we talked about a war film, what interested us most was how to act it out ourselves. How the Liberation Army won the war, how they fought the American imperialists, how the story developed, what stronghold there was, what people there were, and so forth. I would divide the children up and assign roles. One side would be People's Liberation Army soldiers, which I always led. The second or third official would lead the American imperialists. Pause. Once in power, Lilu changes the currency of the playground. Instead of hoarding food, which he doesn't have, he hoards information and stories. He becomes a leader not through brute force, but by organizing the group and giving them a narrative to play out. He mimics the only stories available to him. The war movies of the People's Liberation Army fighting the imperialists. This is a clean regime change. Lilu topples the king not by out-muscling him, but by exposing fear and striking first, collapsing the myth of invulnerability. But the real shift comes after. He doesn't rule through terror or hoarding because he lacks material power. Instead, he changes the currency of status from goods to information and narrative. Stories replace offerings. Attention replaces violence. By organizing, questioning, and reenacting stories, he turns leadership into coordination rather than domination. It's his first demonstration that power can be built from cognition, not possession. Back to the book. Our schoolyard was surrounded by a high wall too high to see or climb over. Not even treetops were visible over it, except in the back corner where the wall crumbled and curved into the yard beyond, which tossed the tresses of a weeping willow tree. We were not allowed to go there, but after I became friends with the lizards, my courage grew. My inquisitiveness and imagination, which came from my shut-up life, focused on that intriguing, crumbling wall. Perhaps it would be my route to the outside world I had never seen. After I became first official, I once told the third official to ask whoever came to take him home to unlock an outside bolt of the window. I went out through the window into the backyard. Although it was bigger than the dormitory, it was still small. The walls were so high that I could not see what the outside looked like. The crumbling segment, however, was lower. It took me several weekends to move stones over to the wall. I piled them up until one day the pile was high enough for me to climb over. On the other side of the wall, I was amazed to see ruins, a mound of rubble that retained some semblance to a terrace surrounded by walls on all sides. I dropped to the ground and started to explore. I stayed in there all day, very excited. I ran about, sat on a branch of the willow, protected from the summer sun. I examined the ruins, climbed in the tree, dug in the dirt, and did all kinds of things. When dusk arrived, I was up in the tree and could see the sun fall into the far end of the field beyond the second wall, a huge balloon falling downward, slowly and solemnly. The feeling was wonderful. I was intoxicated with love for nature. The lizards were crawling around. I had friends everywhere. Pause. This moment of solitude is critical. For a child raised in a collective, watched by teachers and other children 24/7, being alone is a radical act. He finds a secret world, the ruins, where he can be himself. This is his first act of true escape, not from people but from surveillance. The wall isn't just physical, it's the limit of what he's allowed to know. Becoming first official gives him access, but he uses that power not to dominate others, only to create a blind spot for himself. Moving stones over multiple weekends is quiet, patient rebellion, not impulse. On the other side, he doesn't find freedom as spectacle, but as solitude. Dirt, trees, light, silence. For the first time, no hierarchy is watching him perform. The ruins become a private territory where curiosity replaces fear and loneliness turns into choice. Back to the book. Suddenly, I noticed how dark it was getting. I realized I should go back, but I could not find a place to get back in. The walls were crumbling but very tall, impossible for me to climb over. I could not think of getting out by any other way than the way I had come in, but I could not get over the wall. It was getting darker. Though it was summer, it was very cold at night. I started to feel scared. The sense of loneliness grew stronger. The vague shapes of the ruins became frightening. The insect noises sounded strange and threatening. Afraid and confused, I lay on a stone tablet and soon fell asleep. I woke up blinded by the sun. It was Sunday. In the daytime, I was less afraid. I felt as if I had conquered something. I did not want to go back. I lay on the willow branch, thinking and dreaming and throwing stones. Then I saw that one part of the wall was lower than the rest. I piled up stones, climbed over the wall and into the fields beyond. I walked back and forth in the fields. Eventually, I came to the front gate of the kindergarten, which was open for the parents to bring back the children on Sunday afternoon. I sneaked stealthily through the gate. No one saw me or cared about me. Nobody knew what happened. In the evening, everyone came back. They talked about what they did at the weekend. Suddenly, I felt that everything they said was so dull. What I had experienced was a great secret. My experiences in the ruins were different from everyone else's life. It was a bridge that led me to another world, another kind of life. From that time on, I went outside every Saturday and Sunday. I never told anyone about my adventures. The secret place belonged to me alone. Until I left the kindergarten, it was always a source of private happiness. It was a place where I could cherish my loneliness. There I could see it not as something that made me inferior, but as my treasure. When I was about 6, something happened. It was a Saturday when I saw what appeared to be the disc of a sunflower on the willow branch. It was black with lots of holes in it. I didn't know exactly what it was, but it looked fun to play with. I needed a stick to get it down. It was like digging at a bird's nest as it came loose. I hit it and it fell on the ground with a thud. Thousands of hornets flew out of it. I didn't know anything about hornets, and I was dumbfounded when they whined around me. Some stung my face. It hurt, and I started to hit out at them with my stick. The more I hit at them, the more they stung. Thousands of hornets flew around me and would not leave. Big lumps swelled all over me. The more violently the hornets attacked me, the stronger my will to fight them. Swiping at the hornets with the stick, I felt like a hero in the People's Liberation Army fighting American imperialists. But I couldn't hit even one of them. I was stung so seriously that I couldn't open my eyes or mouth. I was losing strength and finally I fainted. He made the mistake of assuming the hornets were like the lizards, something fearsome that was actually harmless. Fear is not real. Danger is very real. He applied the wrong mental model. This is the final lesson of his kindergarten years. Courage is necessary, but the world is still dangerous, and not every monster is a friend in disguise. This passage completes the arc from discovery to overconfidence. Being trapped overnight teaches him that fear can be endured and solitude mastered. Escaping by daylight reinforces the belief that patience and observation will always reveal a way out. The ruins become his private proof that loneliness can be power. The hornets shatter that illusion. He applies the lizard lesson too broadly, assuming all threats dissolve under courage and familiarity. They don't. This is the corrective. Insight beats fear, but reality still has sharp edges. Survival requires not just bravery and curiosity, but knowing when a model no longer fits the world. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next. The Circular Economy of Rags. Lilu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 2. The Stinking Ninth and the Fragility of Life. By the 1970s, China's social structure was rigidly defined by the class status of your family. There were the 5 red categories: workers, peasants, soldiers, who were safe, and the 5 black categories: landlords, rich farmers, counter-revolutionaries, bad elements, rightists, who were persecuted. Intellectuals were often mocked as the stinking ninth category, placed at the very bottom of the social ladder, even below criminals. Lilu's parents were intellectuals, which meant the family was socially radioactive. They had no political capital, meaning they had no protection from the state or neighbors. Let's start the next chapter. A week after I left hospital, my father came to collect me. "We can't keep the child any longer," said the head of the kindergarten. "When we agreed to take him, we were doing you a favor. We would not normally accept a child of such terrible family background." I lost the only real home I had known for 3 years because of my family, and as my father carried me away on his bicycle, I wondered where I would be sent next. It took me many years to figure out what this terrible family background was. They can do anything to you if your background is bad. My mother was from a landowning family, and that's bad. My father listened to a foreign broadcast on the radio and someone overheard it, so they accused him of being a spy. That's even worse. Since the Cultural Revolution, all intellectuals have been considered useless. They, like my parents, who had been to universities, were put into the lowest, the stinking 9th category. Pause. Lilu is expelled from kindergarten not for what he did, but for who his parents are. The label stinking 9th dehumanized intellectuals, turning education, usually an asset, into a liability. Back to the book. Dapa and Dama, Big Mum, had 6 sons. Lao Da, elder one, was 15 or 16. Lao elder 2, was 13. Xiaosan, little 3, had died in infancy, but his memory was preserved. Xiaoxi, little 4, was a couple of years older than me, and the twins Xiaowu, little 5, and Xiaoliu, little 6, a year younger. Dapa was very strict with his children. They looked on him with awe. He often told them, "'Cause no trouble but learn more words." That was how he taught his children. He rarely beat them, and they were obedient, honest, and did well in their studies. Pause. 'Cause no trouble but learn more words. Dapa understands the paradox of his time. Education is dangerous now, but it is the only way out in the long run. He is a miner with bad lungs. He knows his body is failing. He is betting on the minds of his children. Back to the book, Dapa's house was as nondescript as the next, its gabled tar paper roof and gray cinder block walls no match for the rough sand brick or top-quality steel brick of the city's better buildings. Dapa was proud of the strong reinforced concrete beam that ran the length of the building at the peak of the roof. It would never sag or break as a wooden beam would. There wasn't much space for 8 people, just 2 rooms and a small courtyard where Dama raised chickens. The front door led into a square kitchen, dominated by the huge stove that burned wood and coal and always held a big black pot or two. Through a curtain was the room where we ate, slept, and lived. Running the length of the room and more than half its width was a long kang, the brick bed platform heated from below that is the focus of every traditional North Chinese home. When Dapa came home, she prepared some good food for him, though even that was not very good. He had worked for years in the mine and his wages were considered high, but with so many mouths to feed, each got only a little share. He was always very tired. He had a bad cough, but still smoked, and everyone took care of him when he came home. He did no housework, but would sit on the kang. Sometimes Dama offered him an egg which he ate uncooked, making a small hole in it with a nail and sucking out the inside. This was the best time of day for the whole family. We all crowded onto the same part of the kang. Elder 1 and Elder 2 did their homework. The other children helped Dama paste paper boxes. We would chat about everything under the sun. Sometimes Dapa would study the newspapers on the wall with us. Often, neighbors called in. Dama was kind-hearted, and she helped anyone with problems. She didn't care for gossip, but people liked to talk to her about their worries or grievances. I would lie on my stomach on the kang, with my feet up in the air, and listen. Pause. We are introduced to the neighbors, showing the different ways people coped with the era. Some, like Big Fool's father, collapsed under the pressure. Back to the book. 4 or 5 families lived in our little street. Dapa's family was in the middle. To the west of us lived Big Fool and his parents, a typical miner's family. His father was an alcoholic who always carried a little bottle of cheap sweet potato gin. His red eyes bulged, his eyelids were swollen and droopy. He was only in his 40s, but he looked older and was already completely bald. The family had almost nothing. Big Fool grew up to be very strong and robust. He was stout and big, taller than anyone else in his age group. He He wore a quilted jacket tied at the waist with a rope and hardly felt the cold. His head was shaved in the old-fashioned way, with a small clump on the forehead and heavy eyebrows like his father's. Big Fool had been backward since birth and stammered. He still wet the bed in his teens. His mother would put the quilt out to dry, and everyone saw that Big Fool had wet the bed again. They laughed at him. He loved to stand on the garbage heap and look into the women's side of the latrine. One day he was seen by Aunt Jang, who sneaked up behind him and poured a bucket of urine over him. For a long time after, people would ask him, "How did you feel with all that urine on you? Didn't it smell?" He would say, No, it didn't smell." People found this hilarious. They would say to his face, "No, it didn't smell." He had big eyes that could look alarmed, but generally he had a foolish smile on his face. He had lost one of his front teeth, and wind whistled through the gap whenever he spoke. Big Fool's father had come to Tangshan from a small village and was very strong. He worked in the mine as an apprentice to Big Fool's mother's father. He often helped with the household chores and, since the parents had only 3 daughters, they accepted their young apprentice as an adopted son and later agreed that he married one of the daughters. He was very hard-working and quite good-looking, but he had a violent temper and already drank too much. Originally it was planned that he marry the eldest daughter, but she found someone else and eloped. Big Fool's mother and Dama were good friends, and she often told Dama of her suffering as they sewed under a dim light in winter. "Look what a good family you have," she would say. "Your children listen to you and look up to you. Your husband doesn't drink and never beats you." One day, when I came back from school, she was talking about her former boyfriend who was well off. She said, "Only because I listened to my father and took a wrong step." She was a typical Chinese woman who stoically bore everything that came her way. She cried and sighed with Dama, her only relief in this hard life. She said her husband was not a bad person. Sometimes he was good to his son and her. If only she could earn some money and buy him plenty of liquor and good food, then he would be good-tempered. In summer, Big Fool's father liked to play cards. The men turned over a big shallow iron bowl and used it for card games. At the end of the night, the one who lost would have to balance the bowl on his head and walk from one lamppost to the next, up and down the block, without dropping it. Usually at midnight you would hear shouts and clapping, and you knew someone was undergoing this ordeal. It wasn't easy, and often the loser ended up crawling on all fours so as not to let the bowl fall off. The men did not like to play with Big Fool's father because he would not carry the bowl when he lost, but he loved playing cards, especially when he had no money to buy liquor. When he lost, he became unreasonable, and when he won, conceited and arrogant. Once we had a fight with some other children from our street. During this fight, Big Fool shouted, "Your father is a spy." After the fight, Da Pa punished all his sons except me. I cried and asked him, "Aren't you my pa? Why did they say my pa is a spy? Are you a spy?" Da Pa said, "I am your pa. Just ignore what Big Fool said. You know he's a fool. He talks stupid nonsense." "There is this other man. I also call him Pa," I said. "Who is he? Is he a spy?" "Don't think about it, child. You stay here. Nobody can do anything to you. If anyone wants to bully you, you have me here." Big Fool's mother came over and apologized, saying, "Don't listen to Big Fool. It's not true that your father is a spy." She caressed my head and said, "He's such a nice, intelligent boy, but pitiful." I felt pained at heart. Pause. Big Fool repeats the propaganda of the state, "Your father is a spy," without understanding it. This shows how deep the political indoctrination went. Even the village idiot knew the political slogans. Then we meet the villains, the Zhangs. They represent the neighborhood committee, the lowest level of government administration in China, which wielded immense power over daily life. Food rations, permits, housing. This section shows how private misery and public ideology reinforce each other. Big Fool's family is wrecked not by politics directly, but by poverty, alcoholism, and inherited brutality. Yet state language seeps in anyway. Big Fool parrots, "Your father is a spy," without comprehension, proving that propaganda doesn't need intelligence to spread, only repetition. Violence at home produces cruelty outside it. Humiliation becomes entertainment. Suffering normalizes suffering. The tragedy is cyclical. The father drinks to escape powerlessness, beats his wife, damages his son, and the son absorbs both the damage and the slogans of the state. When Big Fool calls Li Lu pitiful, it's unintentionally accurate. He's witnessing how an entire society teaches people to confuse dominance with survival and cruelty with truth. Back to the book. When I think of the Zhangs, I think of true evil. Aunt Zhang was the director of the neighborhood committee in our district. She was tall, thin, and ugly with a pockmarked face. Uncle Zhang, in sharp contrast to his wife, was short and fat. Both had small eyes, especially Uncle Zhang. When he smiled, they disappeared. He was of a younger generation of miners and didn't marry until he was well into his 30s. He was quite relieved to have a wife, even an ugly one from the countryside. Unlike Uncle Zhang, however, his wife was not unpopular when they were first married. She liked to visit friends and chat. She knew how to talk to people and made an effort to get to know their affairs. Uncle Zhang got going with the start of the Cultural Revolution in 1966. He knew he was looked down on but suppressed his anger. He became active in the struggle meetings, especially when it came to criticizing the old foreman. The old man was the previous foreman in the mine. Everyone still called him that even though he had no job now. Uncle Zhang criticized the old foreman until he was in tears. Workers were angry with Zhang, but the leadership liked it. When the old foreman was still in charge, he knew his workers well. He knew who worked hard and who didn't. He didn't like Zhang and never raised his wages. Zhang always hated him, and when he saw his chance, he took revenge on the old man. He said the old foreman exploited and oppressed the workers, drank the workers' blood, and served the Japanese invaders. Old Foreman was thus labeled a historical counter-revolutionary, a traitor, and a spy. Uncle Zhang is an opportunist. He used the chaos of the Cultural Revolution to settle personal scores. By accusing the old foreman of political crimes, he destroyed a good man to advance his own career. This was the mechanism of the terror, ordinary people turning on each other for personal gain. Uncle Zhang, on the other hand, was praised by the leadership. During the latter part of the Cultural Revolution, when propaganda teams were sent to monitor other work units, Zhang was assigned to be a member of the workers' propaganda team in a middle school. That was how Zhang got out of working in the pit, which most other miners could only dream about. Uncle Zhang soon became infamous. People despised him even more as he seemed to do nothing but eat fat pork. He gained the nickname Fat Pork Zhang. For the half year that he managed the dining hall at the middle school, the teachers said they never saw any pork and they understood where it was all going. The school leaders didn't like him, and Zhang was not interested in the work of the school, nor was he able to read or write. He called teachers stinking intellectuals. He was happy just to be out of the mines. He became fatter and looked like a ball. Not only did Uncle Zhang eat his fill at the school, he also took food home, and he and Aunt Zhang entertained various leaders with the stolen food. In the end, she got the post of director of the neighborhood committee. It wasn't a highly paid job, but gave her a lot of power. Ration tickets were required to buy such things as meat, fish, bean curd, and vegetables that were in short supply. If she didn't like you, she could simply tell you that she lost them or that she did not get enough tickets from the district government. She also controlled residence registration. If the police found out that you didn't have the proper stamp on your papers, you became a black person and could be thrown in jail. Her close connection with the police gave her further power. When the police wanted information, they would go to the neighborhood committee and ask who were vagabonds, who criminals, who was not behaving properly, who had uttered counter-revolutionary remarks, etc. No evidence was required. If the director wanted to harm someone, she could fabricate a story and the victim would be interrogated and prosecuted. Pause. Aunt Zhang controls the hukou, residence registration, and ration tickets. In a planned economy, you couldn't buy food without tickets, and you couldn't live in the city without a hukou. This gave her the power of life and death over her neighbors. What makes the Zhangs truly dangerous is not theft but control of choke points. Aunt Zhang's power doesn't come from violence. It comes from paperwork, food, housing, legality itself all pass through her hands. In a planned economy, administration is power. Losing a ration ticket means hunger. Losing a hukou means erasure. No trial is needed. Accusation is enough. This is why ordinary cruelty becomes systemic terror. People like the Zhangs don't need ideology to believe in it. Only incentives. They demonstrate the core lesson of the era. When institutions rot, the worst people rise fastest, because the system selects for obedience upward and brutality downward. Back to the book. After she became director, Aunt Zhang was a changed person. The only thing unchanged about her was that she still went visiting. She was like a spy poking her nose into other people's business and then reporting to the leadership in order to win favor and promotion. Nobody noticed it, and they began to play cards on top of the portrait. Fat Zhang and his wife came by. As soon as she was near, she screamed, "What? You're playing on a picture of Chairman Mao." Big Fool's father, already cross because he was losing, exploded. "What are you screaming about? What picture of Chairman Mao?" He hadn't noticed it, as from where he was sitting, it was upside down. Aunt Zhang insisted, "Of course there's a picture of Chairman Mao on the paper. Of course there is." Big Fool's father said, "We're not playing anymore." He stood up and tore the newspaper, and as it tore, he saw the picture. People were afraid of the Zhangs, but not Big Fool's father. He reckoned he was from a good family background and didn't have to be afraid of anyone. He would curse anyone who came his way, and, besides, he had always hated the Zhangs, but now Aunt Zhang had her chance. The next day, 2 policemen in white uniforms visited Big Fool's house. Everyone came out to watch. After the police left, sounds of things being thrown around and broken came from Big Fool's house. Neighbors ventured in. Da Pa, Da Ma, and I went in too. Big Fool's father was still cursing Aunt Zhang. "You vixen, you bitch, you witch! Why shouldn't I have the freedom to play cards? You reported me. For 3 generations in my family we are poor peasants. Why should we be afraid of you?" Pause. Big Fool's father thinks his poor peasant background protects him, but he fails to realize that disrespecting Mao, tearing the picture, is a counter-revolutionary crime that trumps his class background. Big Fool's father misreads the system. He believes class origin is a shield, that being a poor peasant grants immunity. But in this world, symbols outrank substance. Disrespecting Mao outweighs decades of correct background. Aunt Zhang understands this perfectly. Ideology is not a conviction, but a weapon, deployed selectively to crush people who refuse deference. What's lethal here is the asymmetry. Big Fool's father shouts openly, convinced of his safety. Aunt Zhang says nothing and calls the police. One relies on truth and identity, the other on procedure. In that mismatch, procedure always wins. Back to the book. As he raged on, his wife told us what the police had said. He was ordered to write a self-criticism and told not to go to work until they thought it was good enough. If he didn't write a good self-criticism, he would probably end up in prison. He had committed 2 crimes. The first, his vicious attack on the picture of the great leader Chairman Mao. The second, his rude behavior towards a revolutionary cadre, namely Aunt Zhang. Da Pa told the crowd to go away and brought Big Fool's parents over to our house to discuss how to handle this. Big Fool's father got himself a bottle of liquor, cursing all the while. "Is this the new society?" he asked. "Have I lost even the right to play cards? This is worse than the old society." His wife said, "Do you really mean that you don't want to live anymore? You tore up a picture of Chairman Mao, and now you curse the new society. So you really must be ready to die. You are destroying the whole family." He retorted, "What are you telling me? Have I lost the right to curse too?" His wife snatched the bottle from him, saying, "The trouble has all come from your drinking. Look what you've become." He slapped his wife hard across the face and said, "I don't have the right to play cards. I don't have the right to curse. Now you are trying to deprive me of my right to drink." Da Pa went over and said to him, "Look at yourself. Look how much trouble you've brought to your family. If you were put in prison, not only would your life be damaged, but also the life of your wife and son." These words shook him. He heaved a long sigh and cried to Da Pa, "What a time we are living in. What can we do? You all scold me for drinking. But what can I do if I stop drinking? At work no one talks to me. They think I'm scum. I won't flatter the leadership like Fat Zhang does. I earn my money. But now I'm worn out. I've got the same disease as you, brother. I don't think I'll be able to work much longer. What will I do then? I have a good wife and I owe so much to her. But my son is not clever. Big Fool knows nothing. He doesn't even know how to talk properly. How can I depend on him?" Finally, he calmed down. Da Pa made a pot of tea for him, and then the 2 men smoked and started to talk about how to get over the difficulty. At last, they came up with an idea. Dama would go with Big Fool's father to Aunt Zhang with gifts. Aunt Zhang respected Dama. When Aunt Zhang first came to this area, she was looked down on. She was ugly and nobody liked Fat Zhang. But Dama was good to her. So Big Fool's father went to the Zhangs with Dama, and the Zhang spoke to the police. That was that. Pause. This shows the importance of Guangxi relationships. Dama had built genuine goodwill with Aunt Zhang over the years. Now she spends that social capital to save her neighbor's life. This is Guangxi as a substitute for justice. There is no appeal, no evidence, no law to argue, only relationships to activate. Big Fool's father doesn't escape punishment by being right, innocent, or historically red, but because Dama had quietly accumulated trust when it cost her nothing. That stored goodwill becomes a form of currency, spent in a moment of crisis to override procedure and ideology. The system is arbitrary and lethal, yet paradoxically porous. Rules are absolute on paper but negotiable through personal ties. Survival depends not on virtue or legality, but on whether someone with standing is willing to vouch for you. Back to the book. Even though the Zhangs were powerful now, they didn't stop being cruel to the old foreman. By then, he was well over 60. Dapa said he had been to school when he was young, and at the mine was foreman in charge of developing new tools and safety measures. After liberation in 1949, he lost his position, but people were good to him, and he was kind. When the Cultural Revolution came, though, he was repeatedly criticized. Fat Zhang took the lead in accusing him, and the list of his crimes increased daily. In the end, he was expelled from the mine. His house was confiscated, and his only son driven out. His wife had already died. He was all alone, and the endless struggle meetings had almost driven him insane. Now he bowed and smiled to everyone he saw. Even children would command him to stand at attention and shout, "Long live Chairman Mao." He would stand very straight and shout, "Long live Chairman Mao." He had no job, so he had become a rag picker. He had lost his house, so he built a tiny mud shed, so small that his kang took up half the space in it. The other half was filled with all the trash he had picked, which he would sell to the dealer once every 2 weeks. Aunt Zhang often said to him, "Hey, old foreman, you've encouraged young people to do bad things recently, haven't you?" He would stand there saying, "Yes, yes, I haven't behaved properly." Aunt Zhang didn't know what to do with him. She said, "Remember, you must behave properly." He would say, "Yes, yes, I'll behave properly." I liked him. I would go to his shed. In the evening he did nothing but catch lice. He had only a ragged quilted jacket, which he wore all year round and never washed. His eyesight was weak, and he had a hard time finding the lice, but he did the job very seriously and carefully. He was very excited when he found one and made a great fuss about killing it. It was as if all he could do was bully the lice because he was bullied by everybody. When he saw Dama, he stopped behaving as he did with others and became melancholy. Dama and he would talk about his son. As his family had been quite well off in the past, his son was not used to roughing it. He was married to a country girl, whose family looked down on him, because he knew nothing about farm work. The old man needed his son to take care of him and had long wanted him to come to the city, but he could not get over the hurdle of the Zhangs. Aunt Zhang refused to issue a residence card. Once the old foreman fell seriously ill. Only Dama went to look after him, and sometimes I went along. She heated the kang for him. He cried over his ill luck. "I don't know how I have offended the Zhangs so that they would not let my son stay with me." Dama sympathized with the old man and went to talk to Aunt Zhang about letting his son come to the city. She took me along with her. Aunt Zhang said to Dama, "Actually, I have a lot of sympathy for him, although the old foreman treated my husband badly in the old days. But the refusal of his son's request comes from the leadership above me. The old foreman is a counter-revolutionary. How can we sympathize with a class enemy? You must not have anything to do with him. Big sister, we are good friends. You must be careful. Keep away from him." She pretended to be very concerned about Dama, but really she was giving her a warning. When Dama came back, she said to Dapa, "People change when they become officials." I didn't quite understand her point at that time, but Dapa understood. He told his sons never to get involved in politics. Pause. The old foreman is a tragic figure, completely broken by the system. He has lost everything: job, house, son, dignity. Dapa's advice to his sons, never get involved in politics, is the lesson drawn from watching this man's destruction. This is what total defeat looks like in a political system that needs victims to justify itself. The old foreman isn't punished for what he does, but for what he represents: competence, memory, dignity before the revolution. Once broken, he is kept alive only to model submission. His endless bowing, chanting, and self-accusation are not compliance, they are survival reflexes. Even cruelty loses interest in him because there is nothing left to extract. What makes this unbearable is that punishment never ends. Even stripped of work, home, family, and sanity, he is still monitored, still warned, still denied reunion with his son. Aunt Jang's language is the system perfected. Feigned sympathy paired with threat, friendship paired with annihilation. Dapa's conclusion, never get involved in politics, is not cynicism. It's empirical wisdom. Watching a good man reduced to bullying lice is the clearest proof that in this world, proximity to power corrodes everything it touches. Back to the book. I couldn't like the Zhangs. No matter how I tried, I really felt for the old foreman. He always got up before daybreak, at 4 or 5 in the morning. Early risers sometimes saw and heard him sing. But if he saw anyone, he would stop. He had an erhu, a Chinese violin, with broken strings. It still hung on the wall. He would handle it lovingly now and then. The snatches of Beijing opera he sang were all from the Romance of Three Kingdoms. I often went to see him and listened to his stories. Once, when some children tried to bully him, I fought them off. It was then that he told me the story of Jing Ke, a hero who lived long ago in the state of Yan, when the king of Qin, now renowned for his terracotta army, prepared to invade the much smaller Yan, which could not defend itself against its more powerful neighbor. Jing Ke volunteered to go into the enemy's castle and assassinate the king of Qin. His people gave him a hero's send-off and he set off on his desperate mission. Posing as a turncoat, he came to the tyrant with a valuable map of Yan. As he unrolled the scroll for the greedy king of Qin, he pulled from it his dagger and leapt at the king. But the king's guards cut down Jing Ke. The king of Qin conquered Yan along with all its neighbors, and he started the Qin dynasty, 221-206 BC. But Jing Ke has lived in memory as the hero who braved death to defend his country's liberty. I sometimes went with the old foreman on his rounds. Once, when my head was still full of Jing Ke, he took me into an abandoned 4-story building where he went to pick through the rubbish. I was amazed and excited at the great dim space. You could play here whenever you want, he said. No one comes here. And that was how I found the castle, which became a stronghold for me and my friends. We liked to read picture books about fighting, and acted out the stories in our games, staging mock wars. We divided ourselves into 2 groups, the good guys and the bad. We made guns which could fire 3 or 4 shots like machine guns. During the day, we stayed in the stronghold, discussed what to attack, and made paper bullets. At night, we disguised ourselves and prepared for action, then attacked other groups who might be playing games in the street. In the castle, we built bunkers with bricks and tiles and shot from the gun holes. The paper bullets hurt if they met their mark, but couldn't do much harm. Soon, a lot of people gave up gang fighting and joined in this game. Pause. The castle represents a rare unmonitored space in a totalitarian society. Here, the children could create their own world. But even this is taken away. This passage shows how culture and imagination become refuge when politics strips everything else away. The old foreman singing at dawn, the broken erhu, and the fragments of Romance of the Three Kingdoms are acts of quiet resistance. Memory preserved in whispers. Jing Ke matters because he fails. Heroism here isn't victory, it's moral defiance in the face of overwhelming power. The castle grows directly out of that lesson. It's an unpoliced space where children replace street violence with rules, roles, and stories of their own making. For a moment, narrative restores order where authority has only destroyed it. That it will be taken away is inevitable, but its existence proves that even under total surveillance, human beings keep trying to build worlds that make sense. Back to the book. This life in the castle lasted a year or 2. Then an unexpected incident abruptly ended these games. One day we went to the castle and found the grass covered with paper smeared with blood. We were astonished and couldn't imagine what had happened. We were afraid too, so we walked away from it. The next day we saw more of the same paper smeared with blood. This happened several times. All the members of our guerrilla detachment went to see it, but nobody knew what it meant. The concept of sex was a mysterious one, and was always linked with mystery, crime, and evil. People talked about sex only in the most vulgar jokes. So when Little Frog suggested that this paper was to do with sex, everyone called him a hoodlum. He said he had evidence that parents used this kind of paper when they wanted to have a baby and made love. Finally, one day when we were going to the castle, we found that the entrance had been bricked up. In front of the blocked entrance hung a poster with 2 names marked by a big red cross. It was an announcement by the court, and many people were there discussing it. We hurried over. It was said that a man and a woman had been spending nights there together. They couldn't get a wedding certificate because their work unit would not give them approval. They couldn't wait any longer and chose our castle, a deserted building. The court accused the man of rape and the woman of being his accessory. The man was sentenced to 2 or 3 years in prison, and the woman to physical labor under the people's supervision outside the prison for 2 or 3 years. As we stood there, a crowd surged towards us. In front of the crowd was the young couple. The woman had a pair of worn-out shoes around her neck to show her defilement, and the man, while beating a gong, shouted, "I am a rapist! I am a rapist!" They tried to hide their faces, but in vain. Their expressions were very sad. The woman with the worn-out shoes looked so distressed. For a long while, none of us children said anything. We did not know what to think. We felt grieved partly because of the event, and partly because of the incomprehensible mystery surrounding it, and were sad that we had lost our castle. Pause. This era, you needed permission from your work unit, Danway, to get married. The state controlled even the most private aspects of life. This couple, denied permission, tried to find privacy in the ruins, and they were destroyed for it. This is the moment when the state reaches into the last unpoliced space and kills it. The children first encounter blood without explanation, because sex itself has been criminalized into silence and rumor. What is private becomes unspeakable, then retroactively defined as evil. The couple's crime is not violence, but impatience, choosing intimacy without permission. By relabeling love as rape, the system converts desire into deviance, and necessity into guilt. The public humiliation isn't about punishment, it's theater, meant to teach everyone that even abandoned ruins belong to power. The bricked-up castle is the final lesson. There is no outside, no neutral ground, no refuge where authority cannot follow. Back to the book. One day I heard that there had been an explosion in the mine. Dozens of miners were trapped. I was on my way home from school with little Five. The streets were almost empty. An old rag picker told us there had been an accident in the mine. We ran to it, and there we found Dama. She looked stunned. Her husband was among the dozens of miners down there. We waited a long time in silence. Then a whistle blew and we saw about 10 miners emerge pushing carts. On the carts were bodies covered with white cloths. People dashed to the carts. Wives burst into tears when they found their husbands lying there. Those who did not find their husbands asked repeatedly where they were. When some discovered that their husbands were still alive, they fainted with joy. Dama and I looked hard, too. Suddenly we found Dapa on a cart. His face was blue, his mouth, nose, and ears full of coal cinders. He was cold and hard. Dama covered her face with her jacket and never uttered a sound. She collapsed. Throughout the night, neighbors came to see us. Everyone cried. They knew that suddenly this family had lost its pillar. What would they do now? A family of 6 children and a mother. People cried their hearts out. After midnight, they tried to persuade us to go to sleep. Dama tried not to make a sound. The next morning, her eyes looked like 2 big peaches. She told us children to stay at home and not go to school. She went alone to lay out Dapa. She washed him and wrapped his body in the white cloth bought with money provided by the neighbors. Then the body was taken to be cremated. But Dama didn't want this. She was from the country and was superstitious about cremation. Even when the order came that the body must be cremated, Dama still refused to let it go. An official came. At first he tried to comfort us by saying that Dapa was a very good person who had died while performing his duty for the country and the revolution. Dama cried and asked him to give her back her husband. In the end, Dapa was cremated because the leader insisted. The day of the funeral procession, Dama cursed herself for not being able to prevent the cremation. After Dapa's death, the family collapsed. We had nothing left. The mine gave us a few hundred yuan and did not even explain what caused the accident. Dama and some other widows tried to appeal to the court for several years, but nothing happened. Very soon the family had nothing to eat. At first our neighbors gave us some food, but who could afford to support another family for long? Elder one was 15. He took his father's place and became a miner. The day before he went down the pit, Dama was very sad. She said, "Your father died. I am helpless now. If I had any other way out, I would not let you go down into the pit. This is not work for human beings. The leaders are not human." The other children all stopped going to school. Every day they went out to pick cabbage, gather firewood, select partly burnt briquettes, and sell ice lollies. I could no longer stay with them. Pause. The death of Dapa is the total collapse of the family's economic foundation. In a system without real insurance or social safety nets, the loss of the primary breadwinner meant destitution. Elder 1, only 15, has to go into the very mine that killed his father. This is where ideology fully gives way to brute reality. Da Pa doesn't die heroically for the revolution, he dies anonymously, reduced to a covered body on a cart, his cause never explained. The language of honor arrives only to silence questions, not to offer justice. Once he's gone, the system provides a token payout and then disappears, revealing how thin the social contract really is. The family's collapse is immediate and mechanical. No income, no appeal, no recourse. Just hunger. Elder 1 entering the mine at 15 is the cruelest symmetry of all. The machine that killed the father simply consumes the son next. This is not tragedy as exception, it's tragedy as design, showing how a society without safety nets converts death into inheritance. That concludes Chapter 2. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next. The Circular Economy of Rags. Lilu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 3. Moving the Mountain of Social Stigma. Rehabilitation and the Sent-Down Youth. By the mid-1970s, the political winds in China were shifting slightly. Some intellectuals who had been purged were being rehabilitated, allowed to return to work, albeit often in lower positions. This is what happens to Lilu's parents. However, for the youth, the up to the mountains and down to the countryside movement was still in effect. Millions of urban youth, like the Wang's daughter, were forced to move to rural areas to learn from the peasants. This effectively ended their education and separated them from their families. Avoiding this fate was the primary goal of almost every urban family. Let's get started with this chapter. When I was 7 or 8, my parents were being rehabilitated. My father was transferred to the Coal Research Institute, and my mother to the Orchard Commune. We even had a small room. Though it was no bigger than a room in the student dormitory, my family finally had a space of its own. Every few weeks my mother would come in from the commune and we would get together. I called the days when we were together, the days I have a home. But I felt awkward with my parents. They were like strangers to me. I had never called them Papa and Mama, and I found it hard to do so now. They seemed so serious and often just looked at each other in silence, or they would talk about things that I could not understand. My sixth sense told me to be silent, to observe them and stop being the undisciplined boy of the streets. I could see that my parents hated my wildness. Sometimes when they heard about my exploits, they would scold or punish me. It surprised me that they could have so much to say, and I admired their ability to talk for such a long time without stopping. Pause. This isn't just emotional distance, it's misaligned development. Lilu has grown up optimizing for survival, not attachment, while his parents expect obedience and innocence that no longer exist. Each side reads the other incorrectly. They see defiance where there is adaptation. He sees coldness where there is helplessness. The separation doesn't end when they reunite. It hardens into a permanent gap in language, trust, and instinct. Back to the book. Sometimes when my father left town on business, he took me with him. That was interesting. Once, in summer, he took me to Beijing. I remember I wore a black jacket and a pair of blue pants with 2 big patches on them. In Beijing, I felt I had come to a truly strange place. There were so many people. I didn't know where I was, I just followed my father. We left the noisy railway station and got on a huge bus, much bigger than the buses in Tangshan. Everything was new to me. As we rode, I looked out and there was Tiananmen Square. It seemed to stretch out endlessly. When we walked in the square, it seemed boundless. I had my picture taken there. I remember my father told me not to move. A man stood in front of me, and I heard a click. I was very nervous. After Dapa died, I moved back to my parents' home. I was almost 9. There was still a gap between us, but Dapa's death had helped me mature. I started to adapt to my new environment. My father often went away on business, leaving me with friends or relatives. So far, I had lived in at least 9 families. I often saw Dama. Emotionally hers was still my real family, but she was too poor to provide for me. I felt superfluous, being shunted from house to house, and gradually inferior. Perhaps the world did not welcome me. I wanted to grow up fast so I could make money and support Dama. One day, my father's institute told him that he would be sent away from Tangshan for 6 months. My mother was still living in the Orchard Commune, and none of my parents' friends could take me in for so long. One day at school, Teacher Wang said to me, "I hear you're leaving us. Do you still want to learn to read and write?" She was the only teacher in whose class I did not make trouble. She was very patient, never scolded anyone. Every child, she believed, must learn to read and so taught us. I told her I wanted to study. She said, "If that's the case, you should not leave here. You can live in my home if your family cannot take care of you." I was surprised. Wang had never met my parents. She had taught me for only about a year, and besides, I was not a good student. Why should she want to help me? I was puzzled, but I stayed with her for several months. Wang had 3 children. The oldest was a girl who was about to graduate from middle school and go to the countryside. The second was a boy of about my age, and the third a mischievous little girl. Her husband worked as a clerk in the Bureau of Electricity. He was a quiet, honest person. He did much of the housework, which was highly unusual in Chinese families. Their room was divided into 3 compartments, one for the parents, another for Big Sister, and the third for us 3 little ones. Sometimes the boards were taken away and we had more space. There was a low table on the kang where we children crawled around reading and writing. I had to learn 10 characters every day. Pause. Teacher Wang embodies moral authority without force. Her patience, insistence on learning, and willingness to protect a child at personal cost reflect Confucian values that survived not because they were sanctioned, but because individuals quietly lived them. In a system that rewarded fear and obedience, her kindness was an act of resistance. Back to the book, then something happened which abruptly changed this life. It started with a fight. After Dapa died, I hated fighting, and Teacher Wang often told me not to fight, and especially not to fight Fatty, who was 2 or 3 years older than me and much bigger. Fatty's father was the chief of the Bureau of Electricity, a very influential post. Nobody dared to offend him. Fatty lived on the east side of the road, where children had better food and clothing. He led the east side children and often bullied us. Because I was told not to fight, I avoided playing on the road. Under the influence of Teacher Wang, I had begun to love reading and liked to stay at home and read on the kang. One day I came home early from school. Since no one was there, I was bored. But outside, some neighborhood children were throwing stones at a target, so I went out to join them. A pretty little girl with pigtails stood nearby. Her family, I knew, was very poor and humble. Her father sold ice lollies, her mother sewed clothes for others, and the little girl had dropped out of school to help her father sell the lollies. She made no attempt to join in our game, but merely stood watching us. When the game was in full swing, Fatty came up behind the girl and pulled her pigtails. She struggled to get loose, and her head hit Fatty's face. He was furious, dragging the girl along by her hair. When she screamed in pain, I went up to Fatty, slapped his face, and said, "Let go of her." Startled, he did so, and the girl ran away crying. Fatty was momentarily stunned. Nobody had ever dared to touch him. Outraged at my boldness, he pushed me over. I was not as strong as he was, and had not intended to start a fight, but he would not let me go, and 3 of his followers helped hold me down while he hit me in the mouth. I bit his hand. As he recoiled, I threw him off, seized a stone, and began hitting him on the head. Fatty's followers were scared stiff. They had never really had to fight. Bullies that they were, they usually just hit their victims and left. They had hardly expected a skinny boy like me to fight so fiercely and effectively, and they ran away, abandoning their leader. Fatty begged me to release him. I left him there. Pause. Power here is relational, not individual. The fight isn't between 2 boys, it's between 2 hierarchies. In a closed system, every conflict cascades upward through work units, family status, and political leverage. Challenging a bully means challenging the structure that protects him, and the structure always hits back harder. Back to the book. Later, at home, even though my mouth hurt terribly where Fatty had hit it, I behaved as if nothing had happened. Then at dusk, I heard a lot of people coming, with Fatty crying among them. Quickly, I hid in the woodshed. I knew what was in store for me if they saw me. Through a crack in the wall, I could see the scene in the street. At the head of the crowd was Fatty's mother, a shrew of a woman. She had her son on one side and dragged the little girl along on the other. The little girl's parents were there too, and the head of the local safety committee. Fatty's mother shouted abuse at Teacher Wang and her husband, who worked under Fatty's father in the town government. She shouted, "What kind of boy have you people taken in? You've taken in a wild dog, a savage bastard. He has bullied this little girl without reason. And when my son tried to stop him, Lilu hit him with a stone. She shoved Fatty forward, looking pathetic with a big white bandage on his head. Fatty's mother cursed every member of Teacher Wang's family and slapped Uncle Wang's face. My teacher and Uncle Wang could only swallow their anger. They didn't know the true story, and it was clear that Fatty had been hurt. The shrew warned them that when she found me, she would have me locked up in prison and throw away the key. I was clearly so incorrigible that I was probably a political reactionary as well, and they'd never let me out. Listening in the woodshed, I was terrified. It was getting dark now, and I slipped onto the roof of the house, afraid they might search for me inside. Just as Uncle Wang was about to say that I had been there only a few minutes before, my teacher said, "We haven't seen him all afternoon. Who knows where he has gone? I'll see if I can find him." The crowd looked around for me for a time, but gradually left. Now Uncle Wang vented his anger on my teacher. "You're the one who took in such a boy. Look what disaster he has brought to our family. You said he was a good boy, that he had a sense of justice. But look what's happened. He not only bullied the little girl, but injured the boy who was trying to protect her. How can we keep a child like this? Why do you still protect him? Where is he? He can't have gone far." My teacher kept quiet. After a while she said, "I know this child. He is not the kind of boy who would bully others." On the roof, I was listening with tears in my eyes. "I know him. I also know the other boy and his parents, and you do too. Ever since the child came to our home, he has behaved well. Don't you know what happened to his parents? What he needs now is warmth, not abuse. We must find him, even if it means missing supper. We must never let those people catch him and put him in prison. That would be the end of him." I was ready to come down from the roof and save them the trouble of searching when I heard Uncle Wang's voice. "If we do find him, we'll have to send him away somewhere else. He's bad luck. We'll all be done for if he stays one more day. Don't you realize? Our daughter has just graduated from middle school, and I've almost talked the boss into letting her stay in the city to work in a factory. But with all this happening, he won't do a thing for her, just to spite us for what happened to his son, and she'll have to go to the countryside." Pause. This scene exposes how accusation becomes lethal when power is stacked vertically. Fatty's mother doesn't argue facts. She performs outrage, weaponizes injury, and escalates the conflict upward to committees, police, prison. Truth is irrelevant once hierarchy is engaged. From hiding, Lilu watches the cost of his existence compound in real time. Teacher Wang risks her reputation and safety to shield him, while Uncle Wang calculates the collateral damage with brutal clarity. The moment Uncle Wang mentions his daughter, the dilemma crystallizes. Keeping Lilu doesn't just invite trouble, it trades one child's future for another's. This is where Lilu understands something devastating. Innocence offers no protection, justice has no standing, and love itself can become dangerous in an enclosed system. Survival now requires subtraction. Back to the book. The Wangs returned from their fruitless search, my teacher hoarse from calling for me and Uncle Wang no longer criticizing me. They kept saying, "He's such a good boy, we can't let that gang get their hands on him." I could hold out no longer and cried, "I'm here, I'm up here." Joyfully, they helped me down from the roof. I was so stiff with cold I could hardly move. Wiping her tears, Teacher Wang told her husband to brew some ginger tea for me. I cried and cried. Unembarrassed, I felt so warm and protected in the house with them. After drinking the ginger tea, I gradually calmed down and told the whole story of what had happened. Uncle Wang was furious when he heard the truth, but we still didn't know what to do. Next morning, my teacher got up early. Uncle Wang had gone to work. She said to me, "Let's go and apologize to Fatty and his family." If she had said it the night before, perhaps I would have done so. But now, in the morning, I said it was not my fault and I would not apologize. She looked very sad and said, "All right, if you don't want to go, we won't go. But let me tell you a story. Do you remember the story Chairman Mao told us in his essay? Once upon a time, there was an old man. This old man had a wife and a good obedient son. Every day they went out to cultivate a small piece of land and lived a good life. But one thing troubled them. There was a big mountain in front of their house, right outside their door. Every day they would pass the mountain on their way to the field. The old man thought, I have suffered from this, but I don't care that much now. Yet my children will have to climb the mountain every day. I should move the mountain. So he decided to move the mountain. My teacher said, If you are determined to move the mountain, you'll have to move it piece by piece. You can't do it all at once. I understood and said, "Let's go and apologize to Fatty teacher." Now my teacher was embarrassed. She felt deeply sorry for me. She knew I had been wronged. Her elder daughter would soon graduate from junior middle school, and my teacher was trying to get her a job in the city. She depended on Fatty's family to help with this. If she failed, her daughter would be sent to the countryside. If I didn't apologize, she would lose any chance of keeping her daughter in the city. Teacher Wang then went out and spent half her monthly salary on fruit, powdered milk, and other special foods, delicacies she would never think of buying for her own family. We took the presents with us and went to see Fatty. When his mother saw me, her eyes immediately became two fireballs. She jumped at me and jabbed at my forehead with her finger. "So you are Li Lu! You are Li Lu!" She grabbed me and hit me again. How I hated her! My face was burning with rage. At any other time, I would have bitten the fat hand that was grabbing my collar. But I remembered my teacher's story and suppressed my anger. My teacher handed over the presents and asked how Fatty was. He was lying in bed, swathed in bandages. He started crying, but without tears. When Teacher Wang reached out to comfort him, Fatty's mother immediately pushed her hand away and said, "Don't you touch him. He's already seriously injured. You'll just hurt him more." Teacher Wang's face turned red to the neck. She could only offer more apologies, to which Fatty's mother retorted, "Your husband is such a good man, but look what you've done. How could you have taken in a criminal like this boy? Do you know what his family background is? His father could be a spy, or a landlord, or a capitalist." My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly realized that she could not really know anything about my father. It was just angry talk. She kept saying, "How could you have kept this bastard in your home?" My teacher's face went from blue to purple as she apologized. "We're sorry. His parents are good people, revolutionary cadres. They are very busy, so I am helping to raise him. It's all my fault. He is a good boy. I was careless this time so that he made a mistake. Please take your anger out on me." At this moment, Fatty started wailing again. I felt unhappy that Teacher Wang was being abused because of me. I stepped forward and said, "No, it was not my teacher's fault. It was all my doing. It was all my fault. I am sorry, Auntie. I'm sorry, Brother Fatty. I apologize to you. I'll kneel down before you." I knelt down. With tears in her eyes, my teacher immediately pulled me up and said, "It was all my fault. I didn't educate him in the right way." Fatty's mother was dumbfounded. She didn't expect me to do this. Fatty's screaming turned into laughter. Jumping on his bed, he called to me, "Hey, boy, come over here." I went over to him. "Will you be my horse when we play War of Knights?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "I will." He always wanted to be the knight and never the horse. And as he was cruel, he always picked a thin little boy to be his horse. None of the horses could stand his weight, so he always lost in the battle. Then he would get angry and blame the horse and beat it. Now he wanted me, and I had said I would be his horse so his mother could no longer accuse me of being a class enemy or the son of a class enemy. "All right," she said. "I forgive you this time. I have already told old Lou, the police inspector, to investigate this case and look into the boy's history. I told old Lou if it turned out that the boy belonged to the enemy class, he should be sent to a reformatory. Now you've come and apologized today and shown a correct attitude. My son also said that he could forgive you. All right, you can go now." Pause. This is the most brutal moral compression in the entire childhood. Teacher Wang's story about moving the mountain sounds like patience and wisdom. But here it is translated into something far harsher: voluntary humiliation as a survival tactic. Everyone in the room understands the truth. Li Lu was right, Fatty was wrong, but truth has no leverage against hierarchy. Apology is not reconciliation. It is ritual submission meant to satisfy power and halt escalation. When Li Lu kneels, he is not confessing guilt, he is absorbing blame to shield the Wangs. Agreeing to be the horse is the final seal on that bargain. He accepts a role of degradation, so the accusation of class enemy cannot be activated. My feelings were complicated. I suppressed my anger and comforted myself by thinking that I was moving the mountain bit by bit. I said in my heart, "Wait till I grow up, Fatty. See how I will settle accounts with you." As we came out of the house, my teacher sighed. She wiped tears from her eyes. We did not say a word. I knew how heavy her heart was. We walked in the sunlight, aching in silence. I felt such loneliness, indescribable bitterness. helplessness, but also hope, understanding, and love. After the death of my Dapa and the fight with Fatty, it seemed that my childhood was over. I was no longer carefree. I lost all interest in war games. I wanted to see and learn so many things. I started to observe, study, and understand people. I became more and more reserved and introverted. I was beginning to understand that mountains could only be moved little by little. This ends Chapter 3. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next. The Circular Economy of Rags. Lilu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 4. The Earthquake. July 28, 1976. Tangshan, a city of over 1 million people, was the industrial heart of Hebei Province. At 3:42 a.m., a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck directly under the city. Because it happened at night and directly beneath a dense urban area with unreinforced masonry buildings, the destruction was nearly total. Over 240,000 people died. Some estimates suggest much higher. Politically, this happened in the Year of the Dragon, a year of immense instability. Premier Zhou Enlai had died in January. Mao was dying. The Gang of Four was wrestling for control. The government's response was slow and shrouded in secrecy. They initially refused international aid, citing self-reliance. Let's start with Chapter 4. After the incident with Fatty, I went to live with my parents. Our room was small and dark. My father worked very hard, often until midnight. My mother, though she worked at the commune, came back once every 2 weeks to do the housework. Our family was very poor. We didn't have a sofa, or a television, or even a radio. The most precious things in our home were my father's books. He had hundreds of them. Most of them were technical, but there were some literary ones too. When I was bored, I read my father's books. One day, my father brought back a small radio. It was a big event for the family. We sat around it and listened to the news and music. My father told me that the radio was a window to the outside world. He said, "You should listen to it every day. It will help you understand what is happening in our country and in the world." I followed his advice. I became interested in the news. I learned about the death of Premier Zhou Enlai in January 1976. Everyone was very sad. My father and mother cried. I didn't quite understand why they were so sad, but I felt the gravity of the event. Pause. This is the quiet pivot from survival to orientation. The family has almost nothing materially, but the father's books and the radio form an invisible lifeline outward. Knowledge becomes the only asset that cannot be confiscated. The radio, in particular, trains Lilu to look beyond his immediate suffering and place events in a larger frame. It teaches him that history exists, that power shifts, and that the present is not permanent. Zhou Enlai's death matters not because Lilu understands politics yet, but because he senses collective grief, an unspoken signal that the fragile balance holding chaos in check may be gone. Information, here, is not news. Back to the book. Then came the summer of 1976. It was a very hot summer. We didn't have a fan, so we often sat outside in the evening to keep cool. The air was heavy and still. There were many strange signs. The water in the wells rose and fell. Animals behaved strangely. Dogs barked for no reason. Chickens refused to go into their coops. Some people said these were signs of an earthquake, but the government said everything was normal. My father, being a scientist, was skeptical. He told us to be careful. Pause. This is the collision between observation and authority. The signs are visible, physical, and shared. Water, animals, air. Yet they are overridden by official reassurance. Everything is normal becomes a command, not a statement of fact. The father's scientific caution stands in quiet opposition to political certainty, and the cost of that mismatch is catastrophic. When power treats panic as a greater threat than reality, it teaches people to distrust their senses. And in this case, that lesson is paid for in lives. Back to the book. On the night of the 27th of July, it was exceptionally hot. We couldn't sleep. My father was still working at his desk. My mother and I were lying on the bed. Around 3 a.m. on the 28th, I was awakened by a strange noise. It sounded like a heavy truck passing by. Then the ground started to shake. At first, it was a gentle vibration, but it quickly became a violent jolting. "Earthquake!" my father shouted. He grabbed me and my mother and tried to push us towards the door, but the shaking was so violent that we couldn't stand. The lights went out. Everything was in total darkness. I heard the sound of crashing and screaming. The roof of our house collapsed. I felt a heavy weight on my body. I couldn't move. I heard my mother calling my name, but her voice was faint. I tried to answer, but my mouth was full of dust. I don't know how long I was buried. It felt like an eternity. I was in great pain. My legs were pinned down by a beam. I thought I was going to die. I thought of the lizards and the castle and Teacher Wang. I prayed to the gods I didn't believe in. Suddenly, I heard voices. People were digging. "Is anyone there?" someone shouted. I tried to scream, but only a whisper came out. I hit a piece of metal against a stone. The noise was loud enough. Soon, the rubble above me was moved. I saw the stars. It was still night. Several men pulled me out. My legs were bleeding, but I was alive. "Where are my parents?" I asked. The men didn't answer. They were busy digging for others. I looked around. Our house was a pile of ruins. All the houses in the street were gone. Tangshan, the city I knew, had disappeared. In its place was a landscape of rubble and dust. I found my mother first. She was trapped under a piece of wall, but she was not seriously hurt. We both started to dig for my father. We called his name again and again. Finally, we heard a faint response. We dug frantically with our bare hands. After hours of work, we found him. He was badly injured. His back was broken. We pulled him out and laid him on the ground. The scene around us was horrific. Thousands of people were dead or injured. People were crying, screaming, and wandering aimlessly. There was no water, no electricity, no food. The heat was unbearable. The smell of death began to fill the air. For the next few days, we lived in a makeshift shelter made of plastic sheets and sticks. My mother and I took care of my father. We had very little food and water. The government sent in the army to help, but the scale of the disaster was so great that it took time for help to reach everyone. Pause. This is the moment when all abstractions, politics, ideology, hierarchy, are obliterated by physics. The state that monitored speech, controlled marriage, and dictated daily life vanishes in seconds, replaced by rubble and silence. Survival reduces to breath, sound, and touch. Tapping metal, whispering into darkness, digging with bare hands. What saves Li Lu is not authority or planning, but human response and chance. The earthquake exposes the final truth of the system he grew up under. It was omnipresent only when enforcing control, and largely absent when protection actually mattered. In the ruins, power dissolves, and what remains is fragility, improvisation, and the thin thread of people helping each other because nothing else exists. Back to the book. The Tangshan earthquake was one of the deadliest in history. More than 240,000 people died. It was a turning point in my life. I saw the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. I saw how people helped each other in the face of total destruction. I also saw the failure of the government to protect its people. After the earthquake, my father was never the same. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. But he never lost his spirit. He continued to study and write. He told me, "Lu Li, you must never give up. Life is a struggle, but it is a struggle worth fighting." Pause. This is where loss becomes orientation. The earthquake strips away any remaining illusion that life is ordered or protected, but it also clarifies what endures: mutual aid, stubborn effort, and meaning carried internally. The father's paralysis mirrors the fate of the intellectual class, physically constrained, politically sidelined. But his continued study and writing show that power never fully captured the mind. His message isn't inspirational rhetoric, it's distilled experience. Survival is not about winning, only about continuing, and that persistence itself becomes an act of defiance in an era built to crush it. Back to the book. The earthquake changed everything. The city was rebuilt, but the scars remained. For me, it was the end of my innocence. I had seen death and destruction on a massive scale. I had learned that the world is a dangerous place, and that one must be strong to survive. As the weeks passed, the initial shock wore off and was replaced by a grim determination to rebuild. We lived in our temporary shelter for months. I helped my mother with the daily struggle for survival. I collected firewood, waited in long lines for water and food rations, and helped care for my father. One day, while I was walking through the ruins of our old neighborhood, I found a small piece of the old accordion from the kindergarten. It was broken and dirty, but it brought back memories of Teacher Lee and the songs we used to sing. I realized then that even though the city was destroyed, the memories and the spirit of the people could not be crushed. The earthquake was a disaster, but it was also a beginning. It forced us to confront our reality and to look for a better future. It was the first of many mountains I would have to move in my life. That concludes Chapter 4. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next. The Circular Economy of Rags. Li Lu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 5. The Death of Mao and the New Era. September 1976. Just 6 weeks after the earthquake, Mao Zedong died. For 27 years he had been the absolute ruler of China, a godlike figure to the people. His death created a massive power vacuum. The radical Gang of Four, led by Mao's wife Jiang Qing, tried to seize power, but they were arrested in October 1976 by a coalition of moderates and military leaders. This marked the end of the Cultural Revolution. The following year, 1977, the Gaokao National College entrance exam was reinstated, allowing university admission based on academic merit rather than political background. This was the moment Li Lu's life truly changed. Let's get started with Chapter 5. One day in September, the loudspeaker, which had been silent for weeks, suddenly came to life. Now important news is to be announced. This one sentence was repeated for half an hour. People gathered on the small playground and asked each other what could have happened. Finally, a heavy voice spoke. The great leader of the Chinese people, Comrade Mao Zedong, passed away due to incurable disease in Beijing on the 9th of September, 1976. A fearful and deathly silence fell, similar to that in the aftermath of the earthquake. Then a piercing wail broke the silence and people began to cry in deep sorrow. The news didn't seem true to me. Wasn't it said that Chairman Mao would live 10,000 years? How could he die? Pause. Mao's death lands like a second earthquake, but this one collapses belief rather than buildings. For years, his immortality had been rehearsed daily through slogans, until it felt like a law of nature. When the loudspeaker finally speaks, the silence that follows isn't just shock, it's ontological confusion. If Mao can die, then certainty itself is fragile. The public wailing is not only grief for a leader, but grief for the collapse of a worldview that promised permanence in exchange for obedience. For a child who has already seen physical destruction, this is the moment when ideological ground gives way too, and reality becomes unstable in a deeper sense. Back to the book. But the grown-ups were wailing, "Oh, Chairman Mao, how could you leave us like this? What shall we do without you?" With the death of Chairman Mao, the last pillar in their hearts collapsed. The first cry broke the dam, and all the pent-up sorrow came pouring out. It was the first public expression of grief since the earthquake, and the crying lasted all day and night. Pause. This mourning is misdirected but genuine. People are crying for Mao because he is the only permitted object of grief. But what spills out is far larger. Buried terror, loss, exhaustion, and the weight of years with no safe outlet. The earthquake took bodies. Mao's death removes the last emotional scaffold holding the pain in place. For the first time, sorrow is allowed to surface without punishment, and it comes out in a flood less a tribute to a man than a collective release from enforced silence. Back to the book. A few days later, Father's work unit gathered people together on the small playground. Then Party Secretary Liu Yuding came up to the platform. He was still wrapped in bandages and wore an army cap. Now he swept the whole audience with a fierce look and said, "Comrades, Chairman Mao has passed away. But the proletarian cause will be carried on. Yesterday we received a shipment of supplies for rebuilding. Just as they arrived at the station, Wang Jian and his son stole a box of biscuits, 2 blankets, and a piece of tar paper. Now haul the counter-revolutionary Wang Jian onto the platform." 2 militiamen dragged up a short, bespectacled man with a pale face, obviously an intellectual. Secretary Liu looked at him in surprise. "All right, you go without placard because of the earthquake. You're lucky, let me warn you, Wang Jian. In 1957 you attacked the party in a frenzy and became a rightist. Remember that the Communist Party is here to stay. The communist power will never yield." Pause. This scene shows how quickly power reasserts itself after shock. While people are still grieving and rebuilding, Liu manufactures a spectacle to restore hierarchy. Accusation, humiliation, reminder of past sins. The alleged theft is almost irrelevant. What matters is producing a scapegoat to signal that surveillance and punishment are back online. By dredging up a charge from 1957, Liu makes time itself a weapon, proving that no amount of disaster, injury, or service erases political guilt. Class struggle becomes a ritual distraction, something loud and familiar to cover uncertainty and fear. Even amid ruins, the system's first instinct is not care, but control. Back to the book. Now he pointed at the audience with a sweeping gesture. Even when all you people here have turned to ashes, this power remains. It will still be a red power. Though Chairman Mao died, remember that Comrade Jiang Qing, Comrade Zhang Chunqiao are still alive. Let me tell you that we have worthy successors to keep the political power. He ended with a grotesque laugh. The next day, several new posters appeared. Down with Wang Jian. Join the fading, work hard for 3 months to rebuild the city. One day the loudspeaker again repeated, "Important news! Important news!" Then a card approached. Liu Yuding again. "Good news," he shouted. "Good news. Our wise leader Hua Guofeng has crushed the conspiracy of the Gang of Four, traitor Jiang Qing, traitor Zhang Chunqiao. Now the 4 of them are all in prison. Good news." Pause. This is truth reduced to choreography. Liu's speech isn't conviction. It's calibration. Power is declared eternal one day, then purified the next. With the same voice and the same certainty, yesterday's heirs become today's traitors without explanation. And no one asks why, because asking would be dangerous. What matters is not belief, but alignment. Liu's instant reversal exposes the core logic of the system. Loyalty is not to principles or people, but to momentum. Survival belongs to those who turn fastest when the signal changes. Back to the book. Liu's strident voice was heard again. "Comrades, we have instructions from above to take part in the parade to celebrate the victorious crushing of the Gang of Four. Follow me, comrades." We set out on the parade, shouting slogans. People looked like ghosts crowding together in the dark, yet there was a kind of excitement in the air. Someone threw a stone onto the cart and frightened the horse. It shied and ran, throwing Liu Yuding from the cart. Someone went over and kicked him. People ignored him and marched on, shouting slogans. Everybody seemed possessed of a desire for destruction. More and more slogans celebrated the overthrow of the Gang of Four. The Kailuan coal mine produced the first ton of coal since the earthquake in honor of the great news. Pause. This is the moment when fear briefly inverts. The parade is meant to display unity and obedience, but it mutates into something feral. Once the signal changes and Liu is no longer protected by the story of power, the crowd treats him like debris. No trial, no slogans. Just a kick as the procession moves on. What's unleashed isn't justice, but release. Years of suppressed rage looking for a target that is suddenly safe to hit. The same people who marched on command now march past their fallen enforcer without a glance. Authority doesn't fall because people become brave. It falls because permission to despise it has been granted. Back to the book. Later I went back to the one-story house area. Big Fool's father had started to work. Big Fool was now a hero whom everyone respected. Old Foreman had disappeared. It was said that he left Tangshan and was put in an asylum somewhere. 100 days after the earthquake, we were told to go back to school. Desks and stools were made of bricks held together with clay. Principal Bao made us practice again and again. I love our great leader, Chairman Mao. We firmly smashed the Gang of Four. Long live Chairman Hua. A fat man from the film crew shouted incessantly, "Okay, it's over." With a big smile, Principal Bao mechanically repeated, "Okay, it's over. School is over." Winter was coming. After some discussion, my family decided to build 2 more rooms. My brother and I did this job for days. Smashed at the panels, getting 2 or 3 reinforcing bars out of them every day. Bricks lay everywhere, but we had to clean the mortar off them. In 2 weeks, a brand new house stood in front of us. This was the first time our whole family had ever worked together. My father became well known in that area as an expert kang maker. I followed him around and gradually became enchanted by building the kang. I began to be proud of him. Few intellectuals could work as well as he, and even among the workers, few could match his skills. Pause. Normalcy returns, but it's hollow and selective. Heroes and villains are reassigned without explanation. Big Fool's father is rehabilitated. The old foreman simply vanishes. showing that survival depends less on merit than on timing and narrative shifts. School resumes as performance, with slogans drilled for cameras, authority mimicking itself until someone yells, "Okay, it's over." Real rebuilding happens elsewhere, in manual labor, scavenged steel, and shared effort. As the family constructs a home together, Li Lu sees his father's intelligence translated into craft, problem-solving made tangible. What was once criminalized now quietly proves indispensable. This is rehabilitation not by apology or policy, but by usefulness. Back to the book. At home one day, I happened to see a worn but fashionable little suitcase. Inside there was an elegant lining made of black velvet, packages wrapped in tissue paper. In one were a few big notebooks. In another package were notebooks with photos in them. The first photo was a young man with glasses and smooth hair wearing a white Western suit. He looked so elegant and handsome. The background of his photos looked the same as that in the postcards. Then I opened the third album. On the first page was a big banknote. There were so many zeros on it. On it was a strange foreigner with gray hair. I felt as if I had discovered some great treasure. I asked, "You've been there, haven't you?" "Yes." He said, "I studied abroad for 6 years." "How well did you study?" I had no idea what the first 20 of the country meant. "When you said you studied better than others, is it the same as you make better kang than others?" My father laughed again. "I studied as well as I make kang now." My mother turned to my father and said, "Don't say too much to the child. It's not good for him. We don't want another political incident in our family." Pause. This is the quiet restoration of lineage. The suitcase isn't just memorabilia. It's proof that the official story about his father was false. What had been framed as suspicion or shame is revealed as excellence, hidden for safety. The photos, notebooks, and foreign currency expose a suppressed past where intellect was achievement, not liability. The father's joke about studying as well as I make kang now bridges two worlds, mind and hand, theory and survival. The mother's warning shows the scar hasn't healed. Knowledge is still dangerous. But for Li Lu, something fundamental shifts. He is no longer just a survivor of chaos. He is the inheritor of competence. Identity, once fractured, quietly recomposes itself. Back to the book. That New Year's Eve, the whole family gathered together, symbol of happiness and family union. We talked the whole night. They told us about their childhood, the radio incident, his working in the mine. We were no longer frightened talking about the landlord background or my father being a spy. After that New Year's Eve, the old wall between my parents and me disappeared. From that night, I felt I had a home, a father, and mother. And I felt I had a history and a certain goal. Spring came, and with it rumors began to spread about an outbreak of cholera. Another order came to gather all the dead in one place. I took part in one reburial. First, the family of the dead went with the soldiers. They used a hook to get the shrunken body out. I saw a huge, deep hole, more than 100 meters long. A row of road rollers drove slowly over it. The weather was still chilly. The wind was blowing. I came down the hill and walked on and did not know where I was going. I decided to go to my kindergarten, which was nothing but ruins now. Then I went to my castle. Only one wall was left erect. The remnant of a slogan was still daubed here. Go all out and rebuild a new Tangshan in 3 months. I envied old Foreman because he had found his paradise. But where was my paradise? Where should I go next? Suddenly I remembered a talk with my father. You look so happy these days, Father. Yes, he said, I'm happy. The National College Entrance Exam has resumed. It seems the world is changing. I asked, what is a college entrance exam? He said, any young person who wants to enter college has to pass an exam. It is a kind of competition. What is competition? I asked. Competition means you work hard and society will give you your reward. Our country needs science. Science is something that can change our life and make it better. How can we acquire science? He answered, that's simple. Go to college and study hard. Pause. This is the moment when continuity finally reasserts itself. Family stories restore a past that was once too dangerous to name, giving Li Lu not just parents, but a lineage and a narrative he can stand inside. Almost immediately, that stability is undercut by mass death and anonymous reburial, history reminding him how easily meaning can be erased. Walking through the ruins of his kindergarten and the remnants of the castle, he sees every former refuge reduced to debris. The question, where should I go next, is existential, not geographic. The answer arrives quietly through his father. Competition, science, study. For the first time, the future is no longer determined by slogans or fear, but by effort and intellect. The return of the Gaokao doesn't just reopen universities, it restores direction. Back to the book. Now I remembered this talk, and the last sentence repeated itself constantly. I now knew what I wanted to do. I want to go to college. I had found my road to paradise. I became excited, and nervous too. As I ran back home, I kept saying to myself, I want to go to college. I want to study. And this is the end of Li Lu's childhood in the ruins. He has survived the lizards, the bullies, the earthquake, and the political terror. Now he has a destination. He will go on to study at Nanjing University, become a student leader in Tiananmen Square in 1989, escape to America, and eventually become a world-renowned investor. But the foundation of his character, the ability to survive, to observe, and to adapt, was built here, in the rubble of Tangshan. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next.